Well, welcome, and thank you for joining me once again for yet another interesting conversation. My name's Niki Seberini, and you are listening to Conversations with Niki. And I assure you that today you are going to be inspired, you are going to be entertained, and you may even be challenged by my guest that I have in the studio today. Now, I don't know if you read these books, these motivational books. I don't know if you're inspired by people who have achieved extraordinary things. I know that Albert Einstein once said, there comes a time when the mind takes a higher plane of knowledge but can never prove how it got there. And Aristotle said, you'll never do anything in this world without courage. It's the greatest quality of the mind next to honor. Henry Ford said, if you think you can do something, or if you think you can't, you're probably right. I don't know what these words mean to you. I mean, do they resonate deeply? Is it just something lovely to listen to and you're motivated for a short period of time and then you move on? Or you're trying to live your life in each and every day thinking about these kind of words? How do we apply our minds? And how do we achieve, as individuals, the extraordinary? Well, my guest today has done just that. And I know you are going to be so inspired by him. I'd like to welcome into the studio today a man that I first heard about many years ago, and I think it was in 2000. It was a few months after he had done the deed. And the deed was plunging headfirst in just a Speedo into the ice-cold waters in the North Pole, waters sitting at around about minus 1.7 degrees, and he came out after swimming a kilometre alive and well. And I remember at the time thinking to myself, how is it possible? It's not possible. Any other person who tried to do something like that would not be able to walk out alive. So I've been following his star. He didn't know that, but I have been following his star. So when I heard that he had just written a new book, 21 Yaks and a Speedo, How to Achieve Your Impossible, and I knew he was coming up to Joburg, I thought I had to grab him with both hands. And of course, I'm talking about Lewis Pugh, maritime lawyer, pioneer swimmer, an ocean advocate, and leading inspirational speaker. Good morning.
Morning.
How are you, Lewis?
Very good, thank you.
Thank you for joining me today. It's
Thank
lovely
you.
having you in the studio. So you've been very busy promoting your book.
Yeah, so we did a tour last week in Cape Town, today and yesterday in Johannesburg, and now off to Durban and Pietermaritzburg.
But hard work doesn't really scare you, does it?
I don't find promoting a book hard work. I enjoy it. It's taken me 9 months to write this book, and this is a day that I've been dreaming about for 9 months.
But this is not your first book. This, of course, we know is your second book. The first book was the story of your life, really, and
Yes.
about all the achievements, achieving the impossible. What made you write the book? I mean, you're still very much in the middle part of your life. You're still achieving so much.
I'm an ocean advocate. I'm campaigning for the protection of the oceans. There are a number of ways I can get my message out. It's either through interviews, or it's through my swims, symbolic swims, and also through writing. And so I wanted to write a story to hopefully inspire people to protect the oceans. This new book, though, 21 Yaks and Speedo, it takes it a step further. It's talking about 21 of my expeditions. They're 21 short stories, and we tell stories about how you can achieve your own impossible, whatever that may be.
Okay, so we can come back to the book,
Yeah.
because people are going, yaks, what's a yak? But you'll put us out of our misery in a short while.
Yes.
But what an extraordinary life you have lived. I mean, you were born in the UK, and when you were 10 years old, you came over to South Africa. Why?
I think it had a lot to do with my father. He loved warm weather. Put it as simple as that. Who doesn't? It was a time in Britain when Britain was going through a difficult period. There were a lot of strikes. South Africa seemed to be an actually wonderful place, and his mother had been South African, and so he sort of wanted to return, I think, perhaps to his roots. And so we packed up and we sailed all the way from Bristol all the way to Cape Town. I remember arriving in Cape Town, and we arrived late in the evening, and Table Mountain was lit up. And this almost, I don't sound too nostalgic, but it almost felt like, like an immigrant arriving in New York, and you see the Statue of Liberty. This was Africa. And it was very exciting as a young boy arriving here.
But I know that you've always questioned. I mean, you've got roots, you've got your heart in both countries, really. But when you first arrived in South Africa, apart from seeing this beauty, did you feel a root, a connection at all to this land when you first arrived?
But perhaps not. So, you know, when you move, when you emigrate, it takes a little bit of time to assimilate. I was very, very different. The schooling had been very different in England. But it's hard not to fall in love with Africa. I remember the very first thing which my father did was he took us to all the national parks.
You must have loved that.
Yes, I mean, as a young boy, you know, when you drive into the Addo Elephant National Park and you're surrounded by elephants, it's slightly different to Dartmoor, where you're surrounded by sheep. So it was hard not to fall in love with this place, and very, very quickly.
Also, I mean, what really stood out for you was the schooling, because I mean, you settled in Grahamstown.
Yes.
And was it St Andrews?
I was at St Andrews.
This terrible, well, I'm not going to say terrible school, because in the book, in your first book, you know, you said there are many people who had fantastic experiences, but you were terribly, terribly bullied.
Well, you know, I don't think I was bullied.
You and others.
Yeah, I don't think I was bullied any more than anyone next to me. I mean, I don't want to dwell too much on it, but the lesson I took away from it is that every single one of us is very different. And there'll be one school which will be right for you, and there'll be one school which perhaps isn't right for you. When I left St Andrews College, I went to Camps Bay High School in Cape Town. Now, this was a very, very different experience. St Andrews was perhaps quite rigid, and Camps Bay, I remember arriving there on the first day, and our classroom overlooked the Atlantic Ocean. I remember looking down onto the beach.
What a dream.
And I had always, as a young boy, wanted to go to Antarctica, and I remember looking out across the beach and thinking, 5,000 kilometers south of here is Antarctica, and I desperately want to go there. And I spent the next 3 years looking out of the classroom, and we had the most inspirational headmaster. He knew the names of every single person at the school, all 600. He knew every name of every parent. He was a leader like I have never ever met before, and he inspired everybody in that school. And it's wonderful to see what a lot of the pupils from that school have gone on to achieve. So actually in my class, because we overlooked the sea, one of them became the world surfing champion, another one's a professional sailor. So a lot of them have got roots in the oceans now.
But what you've said and what you've highlighted is really important, is a mentor, to have someone to look up to. So if someone is leading, you want to follow. And I know that your late father had a huge impact and has always been a great influence in all the decisions that you've taken in your life.
Yes, I mean, the older you get, the more you realise how very lucky you are when you see people who perhaps haven't had that background. I was very lucky. I had both parents were hugely instrumental to me. My mother, she loved reading. She would read me history books in the evening before I went to bed. She'd tell me about all the great explorers, etc. My father wasn't that hands-on, but he was.
Well, he was very involved in the military.
Yes.
And that inspired you. I mean, when you became a reservist for the SAS.
Yes. So my father served in the Royal Navy, so he was just a wonderful father.
Unfortunately, you lost him at a young age.
I lost him when he passed away when I think I was 21 or 22, but effectively he passed away when I was much younger because he got Alzheimer's disease. And for any of the listeners who perhaps had a relative who's got Alzheimer's disease, you'll realise that, you know, what a dreadful disease it is, and it has a lasting impact on everyone around.
But Lewis, your father used to share lots of stories with you.
He was a good storyteller.
And you're such a good storyteller. I mean, I was saying that to you before the interview started. I think that's what's so riveting about your books, is that you take the reader right along with you, and we feel like we're part of this fantastic adventure. But I see it comes from your dad, when he explained. I mean, wasn't he there for the first blasting of the atomic bomb?
Yes, my father was at the first British atomic bomb test, but my father was a great storyteller, but I think it's an African tradition. So if you think about Africans, and this is one of the things I love about this continent, is that Africans, they love telling stories, and they're very, very good at it. So they don't have a strong written tradition, but when you think about telling stories around a campfire, they are absolutely excellent at it. And you know, I've had the privilege of working with Archbishop Desmond Tutu on a commission of inquiry. I remember sitting behind him, and him starting to tell a story, and he slowly builds it up, and then he gets more and more and more excited, and then he starts laughing, and he pulls everybody in, and then he comes in with a big punch at the end, and then he leaves. And that's the art of
leaving people wanting more.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the arts of public speaking are, number one, drop the PowerPoint. You know, the Gettysburg Address and all the great speeches in the world were not done with those things. They were just told from the heart. Number two, make sure you speak from the heart. Speak from a place of real passion and authority. And number three, make sure that when you speak, you have stopped speaking before everyone has stopped listening. Or too often people speak for too long.
But did you apply all of this before or after your TED talk?
TED is an amazing...
I mean, TED is just fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, just to explain to some of the listeners who perhaps don't know what TED is, it was started many, many years ago, and it is short speeches, and initially they were 18 minutes, and they were, quote-unquote, ideas that would change the world. It started in America, and then they had one conference in America, one in Oxford in England, and then the speeches were put onto video, and they're put free on the internet. And now there's been a sudden explosion, now there are other events all over the world. And what's lovely is that the style of it is storytelling. So it is people...
Everyone has access to it.
And it's free. And so you can see some of the most dynamic ideas, whether they're on education, on healthcare, on leadership, on any subject. Just go onto the internet and go TED.com, TED.com. And so I did 2 speeches for TED. I did one after I did the North Pole swim, which was 18 minutes. And then they asked me to trial out a 9-minute speech. So they said, you know, these are on the internet. People actually don't have time for 18 minutes. Could you trial out a 9-minute one? And doing a shorter speech is much harder. But it went successfully, and now they're even trialing out a 5-minute speech. And I think it's a good idea, because if you can't tell people what you're about and what your idea is in less than 5 minutes, well, then you need to sit down.
No, but it's the story. Come on, Lewis, it's the story. You've got to embellish on the details. We want to hear more. We want the full story, because you've got so many fascinating stories to share. In such a short space of a time, you've achieved so much, really. So sitting at Camps Bay and looking out and dreaming about swimming in Antarctica and just...
No, I didn't dream about swimming in Antarctica. I didn't dream...
just visiting? Was it just to visit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you must remember this was sort of 1987. And I had my first swimming lesson the year before. So I'd grown up in England.
So how old were you in 1987?
Oh gosh, so I was about sort of 16, 17.
And you didn't know how to swim up until that point? I find that hard to believe.
I could swim, but I had no training. So I remember there was one classroom where you could see Robben Island. I remember looking out and thinking, and a friend of mine, Laurie Fialkoff, had swum Robben Island. And I don't know even to this day where the idea germinated, but I just thought, right, I'm going to swim Robben Island. And there was a swimming pool there, and there was a guy called Paul Barrett-Smith who trained people. And so I went to him and I said, Paul, I want to swim Robben Island. So he said, well, jump in. He put me into the slow lane, where I remained for some time, and he trained me for a month, and then I just lost patience. And I persuaded the Cape Long Distance Swimming Association to take me out to Robben Island. I started to swim, and you really realised how woefully underprepared I was.
You were 17?
Yeah, I was 17, but the other thing was I was very, very thin. So I've bulked out a little bit in the meantime, but you need to have a little bit of body fat on you when you're swimming Robben Island. The water's cold.
So when did you actually fall in love with swimming? Is it swimming, or is it the sea that you love, the ocean?
Both. I mean, so PT lessons at Camps Bay High School, you go play touch rugby on the beach, and then you'd cool down afterwards by diving in the ocean. And I just love those sort of first 10 strokes when you go underneath the wave, and the fresh feeling, and just
you didn't feel
invigorated.
The cold at that stage?
I did feel the cold. This is one of the misconceptions. People think, well, because you swam across the North Pole, you swam on Mount Everest in a glacial lake, the waters have been even below zero, you must love cold. Nonsense. I tolerate the cold. Anybody who loves cold hasn't been cold before. They really haven't. No. I mean, there's nothing more painful.
There are people who probably think that all you've done your whole life is be an adventurer and a long-distance swimmer and travel from country to country and also speak out against climate change and the conserving our oceans. But you've done a lot more, because you studied law.
Yes.
And I find that very interesting, because you had quite a long period of time when you were a lawyer, but you turned your back on that.
Yes.
And that must have been a very, very difficult decision to make.
I haven't quite turned my back on it, but you know, I'm not a professional lawyer at the moment. It was a difficult decision. You know that perhaps you don't know it, but there's that feeling on a Sunday afternoon where you think, oh, I'm going back to work on Monday, and I really don't want to be there. I want to be somewhere else. And I was beginning to feel that. I was working on a number of very, very big oil pollution cases and some cargo cases as a maritime lawyer in a big law firm in London. And then I was very lucky. A friend of mine at school, his name was David Becker. We were standing outside St. Paul's Cathedral, and I said to him I wanted to go to the Arctic because my parents had told me about these great explorers. They told me about the polar bears. Neither of them had been there, but they told me the stories about it. And I said to David, I just want to go to the Arctic. And he said to me, Lewis, it's so important that you follow your own dreams in life, because if you don't, you're going to be following somebody else's. And imagine getting all the way to the end of your life to realize, gosh, I've just been following somebody else's dreams. And that was just a little sort of lapel shaking moment which I needed in my life. I dreamt of going to this island called Svalbard, which means cold coast in Norway, in Norwegian. And it's halfway between the top of Norway and the North Pole. It's deep in the Arctic Circle. I packed my bags and off I went there.
Just like that?
Yeah, I mean, it was the right moment in my life.
Fear? Was fear there at all?
There was fear, but not panic. There's a big distinction between fear and panic.
Okay, show me the distinction.
Fear is healthy, panic is deadly. So if something is a little bit frightening, that means you're pushing your boundaries, you're growing. You should be moving towards fear. Fear is your friend. Just bear in mind, mitigate against all the risk. So I had a little bit of money, so I had some savings, and I thought, let's just go off there for 3 months. Well, it ended up a little bit longer than 3 months, and then every year I thought, I'll go back to law, but I was just enjoying it too much. And then I really found my true passion, which was I just love swimming. And I suppose that it must have been quite worrying for my mother, because, you know, she paid for me to go through University of Cape Town and qualify as a lawyer, and then I went off to Cambridge University and did a master's, and then I've been working at a top city law firm, and then I say to her, well, I want to swim.
Turning my back. Well, you say not turning your back, but anyway.
and her response was interesting. It was, you know, just go for it, Lewis. And I didn't know how it was going to pan out, but I just enjoyed it so much that I kept on doing it. And then came the moments where, after swimming in many different places around the world over a number of years, I started seeing the way they were changing, principally because of climate change. And then there was that
the environment changing.
Yes, I mean, so in terms of, especially in the Arctic, you see glaciers melting, you see sea ice disappearing, you see plastic pollution all over the beaches. I mean, this is far away from us. You know, some of the beaches in northern Svalbard are over 1,000 kilometers away from the nearest habitation, and you go to them and there's plastic all over them. They're having such a dramatic impact on the environment. And so
also the whale bones you described, that terrific beach with all of those whale bones.
So this was on the other end of the world. This was Antarctica, where there was widespread whaling, you know, at the turn of the century. And in one place called Deception Island, where they used to kill all the whales, all the whale bones are left there. And it's a sort of, I like to think that it's a reminder of man's folly. Luckily, the world realised what they were doing all too late. They passed legislation, and now you know, you're not legally allowed to commercially hunt for whales. But so all this happened, and then luckily I was able to sort of dovetail these passions. Number one was for swimming, and number two, I realised, because my father and mother had taken me to all these national parks as a young boy, was how important that was to me.
So there was a purpose. It gave your swimming and the passion for swimming a purpose.
When I first started swimming, none of the famous landmarks in the world had been swum, other than English Channel, Strait of Gibraltar, Robben Island, and a few others. And so I had this desire to go out there and sort of push boundaries like the old explorers, and try to be the first to swim in various places. And there were two other swimmers doing it at the same time. One was a lady called Lynn Cox, an American lady, a fantastic swimmer. The other one was a guy called Martin Strel. He swam down all the rivers. He swam a section of the Amazon, he swam the Mississippi, the Yaks, etc. I came onto the scene a little bit later. I was left with all the bloody cold stuff. so I was pushed to, you know, the Arctic and the Antarctic, and yeah, that's.
You were happy to take up the challenge. Are you a competitive person?
I hate.
Did it drive you that there were these other two who were exploring and doing things?
It wasn't an official race. It wasn't like Captain Scott and Amundsen trying to become the first people to go to get to the South Pole. Not that that was an official race. But I think we all felt acutely aware that there were very few landmarks left, and that, you know, if you wanted them, it was the first there to get them.
So Lewis, you have this passion, you have a purpose, you want to, you're very passionate about the swimming and the environment, and you're combining both of them. You have the challenge of these other two swimmers who are achieving great things. And you have done just that. You've achieved something that another human being has not. So the question that I have to ask you, is that what drives you every day? And when you wake up in the morning, do you say, because there was a period when I was reading in your book when you did so much within a short period of time. I mean, you were just putting a tick in every single box. Well, what is it? What is it that drives you? Do you wake up and go, but hang on, I haven't done this yet? Or let me do it before someone else does? Or what's driving you?
When I started out, it was pure and simple. I wanted to be the first to do the swims around these famous landmarks. You know, it was like being Edmund Hillary in the 1950s before Everest had been climbed. And I was just very, very lucky in that period of human history where over a period of sort of 10, 20 years, all the famous landmarks got taken. And I remember the last big swim, you know, all the swimmers had talked about this holy grail of swimming. The first person to do a swim in every ocean of the world, a long distance swim in every ocean of the world. And what made it so difficult was that you'd have to do one in the Arctic, and you'd have to do one in the Southern Ocean, both of which are extremely cold. And swimmers all talk about swimming in a Speedo cap and goggles. You know, we don't use wetsuits. And this made it, what people thought was a holy grail, absolutely impossible. So I went and did all those. I remember the final swim I did in the Pacific Ocean. I decided to do it in Sydney Harbour. And I finished it. And it was this immense feeling of satisfaction. We had been through many years through the Atlantic Ocean, the Indian, the Pacific, the Southern, and the Arctic. But then, so what?
You mean what?
So what? You know, you're the first one.
Really?
Yes. It began.
You mean there are no bright lights? There's no bells ringing? Well, momentarily.
It was. We felt delighted because it had been such a hard journey, and so many people had helped me, and that teamwork and the comradeship was unbelievable. Those experiences were unbelievable. But there needed to be something deeper, and there came that awakening at a similar period that I needed to stand up and speak on behalf of the oceans, and to actually be a proper an ocean advocate. And I was very, very lucky because I had this maritime law background. And so now what we're doing now, what keeps me driving every day, is to try and create enormous national parks in the world's oceans, or to spearhead this movement. So the ocean, less than 1% of the ocean is protected. I mean, that compares to on land, almost 10%. And these big national parks on land, like the Kruger National Park in Serengeti, Yellowstone, they were created 100 years ago. We forgot to do the same in the sea. And just because you don't see what's happening in the oceans, it makes you think that everything's okay there, or is perhaps okay there, but it isn't. Just to give you one statistic, African penguins, I absolutely adore them. They are the most wonderful creatures. They're so comical. I just love African penguins. In 1900, we had between 3 and 4 million. Today, we've got about 60,000. And the thing about penguins is they're an indicator species. And what I mean by that is they don't fly. Penguins don't fly, so you can count them. They come ashore, they lay their eggs, you can count them, and you can know exactly how many there are in the oceans. And their numbers of now just 60,000 indicates exactly what's happening in the rest of the ocean.
But why are they dwindling? We don't eat penguin.
No, we don't eat penguin. We used to, so I say we, but South Africans used to eat penguin eggs many years ago. That was banned because of the dropping numbers. 3 things are causing this. Number 1, climate change. Number 2, overfishing. So less fish in the ocean for them to feed on. But the big thing for penguins is pollution, either plastic, which they ingest, or it's oil pollution. So, for example, the biggest animal rescue. This is something which this country can be so proud of. The biggest animal rescue ever done in the whole world was done in South Africa. A number of years ago, a ship called the Treasure, she sank off the west coast of Africa, spilt oil everywhere. SANCOB, the environmental charity which looks after seabirds down in Cape Town and around the South African coast, volunteers from SANCOB cleaned 20,000 penguins.
Amazing.
And then they moved another 20,000 out of the way, so they saved 40,000 penguins. You know, if you think about it, I said there are just 60,000 left. They saved 40,000. An oil spill, a major oil spill, can wipe out at least half the population.
Do you ever feel like you're a lone voice, though, Lewis? I mean, people are listening to you because you're doing these extraordinary things, and you're always going to have people who are going to support you. But so often, you know, you're just put in a corner and seen as, I don't know, bunny hugger, tree hugger. People don't necessarily take you seriously if you're pro the environment. How do you respond to that?
I hope people take me seriously. I mean, campaigning.
Of you, we have one, you know.
Yeah. Just to say just one thing, and that is, I'm not the only person campaigning for the environment. They're all too often, though, they're women. When you think of all the great environmental campaigners in the world, a lot of them are women. They really are. And I think that's
why.
Well, I think they care for the environment more. They see they don't want their children to grow up in a world which is not sustainable and not safe, and so they're very passionate about it. It really is time for men in South Africa to stand up and say, hey, we really need to protect this. I don't think so I don't think I'm a lone voice. I hope people take me seriously. I've spent a lot of time campaigning in Great Britain, and I was absolutely overwhelmed recently. The Prime Minister has now announced that he's going to be declaring 31 marine protected areas, or marine protected zones, which are national parks in the oceans around Great Britain. I certainly wasn't the only person calling for this, but when you hear such wonderful news, and it's a good starting point.
It's a huge achievement.
We need more. Yeah, it warms the heart, and it makes you realise together we can actually do this. We must always be telling government, telling businesses what we want. We mustn't be quiet, and we must also talk truth to authority.
I want to talk, before we get to the book, I want to talk about the swim. There were many swims that we know, and you achieved so much. I mean, I love the fact that you've swum Lake Malawi. Yes. I love the fact that you, when I read in the book that you know, people said avoid the hippos. Be very careful, and if you're in the shallow end, just swim as fast as you can. And you swam so fast that you swam in a semicircle. I think your one arm was stronger than the other. So you've achieved, and I've said it again, really incredible things. But I want to focus on that particular swim. The swim of all swims, if maybe you would describe it as the swim of all swims, and that is your swim at the North Pole. How did you get to the point of deciding that this is the Everest?
Well, I then went to do a swim on Everest, and perhaps the North Pole swim got more media attention. I mean, it was a huge moment. In 2005, 2006, 23% of the sea ice cover had melted away. So there you've got a person who's swimming across the North Pole. And not just we didn't want this to be a stunt, we wanted this to be a proper symbolic swim, so a kilometre. You know, what does this say about the health of our oceans and about climate change, and somebody should be swimming at a place which should be frozen over, and has been for many, many years. But the swim actually on Everest was technically much more challenging, because not only was the water freezing cold, a little bit warmer than the North Pole.
What was the temperature?
So North Pole was minus 1.7, so saltwater freezes below zero. The one on Everest was at 2 degrees. The problem with the one on Everest is that you're at altitude. So we're 5.5 kilometers above sea level, so very, very difficult to breathe up there. And when you got when you got cold on the one hand and very little oxygen on the other hand, that's a lethal cocktail. And nobody had done a swim anywhere near there. The wonderful thing about swimming on Everest, though, is that there are no hippos, there are no sharks, there are no crocodiles, there are no leopard seals, and there are no polar bears. So it feels safe from that point of view.
So which did you enjoy? The Everest or the North Pole?
They're huge challenges.
Did you enjoy either? I mean, I'm talking about enjoy.
I would say that I enjoyed Everest more. Ever since I was a little boy, I thought that I would be going to Everest one day. And when you're walking along that pathway, so it was a 2-week trek to get to Everest, when you walk around that pathway and suddenly in front of you is Mount Everest. I mean, it's just an enormous mountain and a beautiful mountain. I mean, there are more beautiful peaks than Everest, but she is a beautiful mountain. And there is so much mystique. And the Nepalese people, the Sherpas, are, pound for pound, I've never met a group of people who are so strong. They carry all the equipment up there. The equipment which they can't carry, they put on Yaks. but they're so humble.
Hence the name, the title. The Yaks have appeared.
Yaks have appeared. and so this book, the title is an unusual title. I was out late one night, I was feeding the yaks, and this one yak had been working very, very hard because it had carried the boat up Everest. It would be fair to say that nobody's carried a boat up Everest before. There's no road up Everest. You can't take it on a trailer.
The yak took your boat?
A yak had to take this boat. So it was an inflatable boat which we had unassembled and put on the back of a yak. And it had been strong. It had gone over some very, very rickety bridges. It had been courageous. It had carried on going all day. I thought, those are qualities I can really relate to. And then later we were speaking to the team and asking ourselves, what are the qualities we most admire? And we came up with 21 of them. And so these were the 21 short stories about 21 expeditions. And we hope that we can relate these experiences, or we hope we do relate these experiences to ordinary folk like you or me, and whatever you're trying to achieve.
Lewis, I love the 21 stories, and I'm just going to highlight what's in here. You cover channel, because so just to repeat, each story is a message, because even throughout this interview, when you talk about a story, you always say, and what I learned from that was, and what I got out of that was. Yeah. So I think that's very much how you see the world, their experiences, and you gain and you move forward. And you've taken that, and you've taken your love of storytelling, and of course your fantastic experiences and achievements, and you've put it all into one book.
Yes.
So you've got Channel, and Channel was when you swam the English Channel, and Fussbait, and that's when you're talking about when you were training for the SAS. Escape, Visualize, Mind, Blame, Believe, Push, Follow, Grind, Test, Open, Hope, Break, Strive. And with each story, you're talking about a personal experience. So the readers can really go along that particular journey with you and take that extraction with you. And I asked you, and we're still going to come back to the swim because I still want to go there, and we've still got too many questions I have to ask. But I wanted to ask you, revisiting that when it comes to writing a book, everything seems to be so incredibly clear in your mind. Is it because as you were having the experience, you were repeating it? It's almost as if you were repeating it so that you could tell other people. How do you keep such
Do you remember that quote which you gave from Einstein as we started this interview? Sometimes these things become clearer later on in life. But I do remember each one of those swims. I remember them very, very vividly. I mean, they're such intense moments. Let's go to that North Pole swim. Imagine you walk across the sea ice. I remember looking into the water. It's completely black. They call it the Black Ocean. I've never ever seen water which looks so frightening before. It's 4.5 kilometers to the bottom. The water's minus 1.7. There's a wind blowing. And now you're going to dive into that water. And you know that water is 7 degrees colder than the water in which the passengers of the Titanic perished. You better have a very, very strong reason for getting in there.
So what did you do? How do you train your mind? We talk about the thermal heating. You talk about, and that's what we want to talk to Professor Tim Noakes about, is the ability to raise your own temperature. So is that something that you're able to do? You've got a fantastic team. You spoke about the importance of your team, your friend David, the positive talk, your visualization. But how do you achieve something like that? And I'm asking this question because every single day we're faced with challenges. We all have dreams and we all have desires, and there are things that we all want to achieve. But perhaps some of us are held back because we think we can't really do it. Now, physically, if any of us really jump into those waters, we'll be dead in a couple of seconds. But you took your body to a completely different level by using the power of your own mind.
Let's just take one step back, and that is, the core message from this book is that there are very, very few things which are impossible to achieve. When I hear people say, oh, nothing's impossible. Well, with respect, that's bollocks. There is no ways that I am going to be able to run 100 meters in under 10 seconds. There's no ways I'll become Premier of China. You know what? I actually don't dream about doing those two things. But if you've got to dream about something, I think you also have the capability and the capacity to actually do it. The two go hand in hand. You wouldn't have that dream unless you had that capability. And this book talks about how to put all those things together. How do I get my mind right just before I'm going to go to the North Pole? The only way you can do it is to focus on the why. Why are you doing it? And the second thing is, you've got to break these things down into manageable chunks. I remember just thinking, whoa, this water, it looks so frightening. And David Becker, my coach, he quickly ran up to me. We had people from 10 nations in the team, and we had brought all their national flags with us. We were going to put them all the way around the North Pole. He said, hold on, Lewis. I'm going to put one of those flags at every 100-meter mark. And all I want you to do, before you get into the water, is I just want you to, when you dive in, I just want you to swim 100 meters. You get to the first flag, slow down, and think about all the men and all the women from that nation who've inspired you so much to be here today. And then carry on, do another 100 meters, do the same thing, and so on and so forth until you get to the end. It's crushingly obvious that the idea of swimming a full kilometre is impossible. You need to break these things down into manageable chunks. And so sometimes people have these dreams, and they look at them, and then they get overwhelmed by them, and then they don't push themselves. Just work out the plan, assemble the team, and then just take the first step. And eventually, I think this is the one lesson which I took away from the English Channel. I mean, the English Channel is a long swim. For me, it was nearly 15 hours. But as long as you take one stroke at a time, eventually you will reach France.
And you also say something in the book, I've written it down here, something about don't give up, because if you give up, it can become a bad habit. You say something like that, and I guess that really stood out for me.
Yeah, you know, all too often in life...
The book's full of those.
All too often in life, and myself included, we give up, and often we give up at the 11th hour. And when we do that, there are a number of long-term consequences of doing that. The first thing is you wasted all 11 hours. The second thing that happens is you just want to kick yourself because you're so close to achieving your dream. But the third thing is the most long-lasting consequence, and that is that quitting can very, very easily become a habit. I try to, whenever I start something, to absolutely finish it, because when you finish it, it gives you, it's empowering. You say, well, I have achieved that, and therefore I can do a little bit more next time. When you quit, it's doubly difficult the next time.
You nearly quit though, because you had a trial, didn't you? You jumped into the water. It was incredibly cold. Your body responded. Your fingers swelled up.
Yeah.
What physiologically? What actually happens when you jump into this ice cold water?
Well, humans are made. The majority of us is water, and when water freezes, it expands. So the actual cells in my fingers froze, and they expanded and they burst. Incredibly painful. But when these things happen, and just trying to take a bigger macro picture, we will all, every single person, will go through times in life where things don't go according to plan, where they fall. And we used to have a saying in the SAS, they used to say that self-pity is a weak man's emotion. And it's so true that when you start feeling sorry for yourself, that's when everything's going to go wrong. Somehow, you've got to find it deep within yourself to stand up and keep taking the next step forward, and just keep taking that next step forward.
How do you know when to give up, though?
Yeah, this is an interesting thing, because one of the chapters we talk about perseverance. The chapter I entitled it "Fussbait." I just love the word fussbait. There's a difference, and if you speak to anybody who's achieved anything in life, they will say to you that fussbait and determination was absolutely critical. Nobody has a smooth path to achieving anything in life. But there is a difference between, sometimes in life, fussbait determination, so let me just try to be more eloquent, is a double-edged sword. Taken to the extreme, it can be very, very dangerous. There's a difference between quitting and letting go. And sometimes I think there are times in life where you actually do need to let go. But there are other times in life where you have to take the bull by the horns, bite your teeth down, and just keep on going.
So the key is knowing the difference.
It's knowing the difference, and you only get that. You only get that knowledge.
Hindsight, very often.
Well, later on in life. Later on in life. Yeah.
So all these experiences, the fussbait, the having people help you, the mental preparation, it still doesn't answer my question about how your mind can actually alter on a physiological level your body's temperature. So basically, Professor Tim Noakes was measuring your temperature throughout. So I'm not just talking about the North Pole. I know you did the peninsula around the Cape,
yes,
and all of those swims, and your body temperature never dropped. In fact, through a lot of the talk beforehand, your body temperature would rise before you would jump into the water.
Yes.
And that says a lot. It says a tremendous amount. People talk about the power of the mind. People talking about healing oneself. You've proved that. I mean, here it is. Because a normal person would freeze within a few seconds.
Yes.
You did not.
This is a whole interesting thing. I often get asked, people say to me, Lewis, are you different from other guys? I'd love to say I am. I'm not. Physiologically, I'm exactly the same as any other person. I just don't want to quit there. I hate quitting. But the second thing is the fear. That fear is so powerful. We think it's a Pavlovian response. Remember those experiments which the Russian scientists did with the dog and the food?
Mm-hmm.
Every time I see cold, my core body temperature starts rising. And we just think that's just because I've been exposed to cold so many times that it actually generates the heat inside me, because my body deep down subconsciously knows I've got to heat up in order to survive in the water.
Well, there's a letter that you wrote to your friend David and to the professor, because you didn't think you were going to make it. So do you mind if I read it?
Yeah,
Taken from your book, Achieving the Impossible. Dear Prof and David, tomorrow we depart for the North Pole. I'm very excited. I want to thank you both for coming with me on this expedition. If I don't come back, I would hate it if anyone blamed you. I'm doing this swim of my own free will. What you've done for me has been amazing. You've brought me so much happiness and joy, and helped me incredibly with my campaigning. Neither my mother nor I would ever want people to point fingers at you if something goes wrong. In the event of my not coming back, I want you to show the press this email. With kindest wishes, Lewis. How difficult was it to write this letter?
It's difficult. You know, I haven't read that email now for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, and it brings memories back. You have to mitigate. I'm not talking about you have a dream, you dive in and you go for it. You have to mitigate against all the risk. You really do. And then you have to dive in and go for it. You can't dive into the water with thoughts of victory and defeat. When you walk up Everest, for example, you've got to leave your doubt at the bottom of the mountain. And when you write a letter like that, you realize that perhaps you're not going to come back. I mean, that letter was written before the North Pole swim. When I climbed up Everest, they were cleaning up the mountain and they were bringing dead bodies down when we were walking up there. And you realize that things could go wrong. And I just hate the idea that anyone would blame any person in the team. We all know what you're doing. We're all volunteers. And I'm just incredibly grateful that they would help me in this campaign. All of them we've all become so passionate about our oceans over this journey for over 27 years. We've all seen them change. And there comes a time when you need to stand up. So writing the letter was very, 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 very difficult. But I needed to make sure if I didn't come back, they'd be protected. We live in this funny world where everybody wants to blame somebody else. And I never wanted anybody to blame Tim or David.
What went through your mind the moment before you pushed your body into this freezing cold water?
I'll tell you exactly what happened. I had a bit of a wobble. I remember looking into the water and thinking, if things do go pear-shaped now, how long is it going to take for my frozen corpse to sink the 4.5 kilometers
Did you really think that?
To the bottom of the ocean? And that's not the best thought to have when you're trying to do the first swim across the North Pole. But quite by coincidence, we'd arrived there on the same day that my father had died a few years earlier. And all I was thinking about my mother, and thinking if I kill myself here today, trying to prove this point to world leaders, I leave her without her son and her husband on the same day. And I turned to David Becker, I said, if things don't go according to plan, I said, for God's sake, don't let me do the full kilometer, pull me out after 500 meters. And he pulled me away from the edge of the ice and he said, Lewis, if you dive into the water, preparing to swim a kilometer, but also thinking about the possibility of getting out of just 500 meters, do you know what you're doing then? And I said, what? And he said, Lewis, you're confusing your subconscious because you're preparing for victory and defeat at the same time. And he said to me, there is nothing more powerful than a made-up mind. He said, I need you to make up your mind right now. You need to walk to the edge of the sea ice. You need to believe in yourself, to believe in us. And I now need you to swim to the North Pole. And I walked up to the edge, I said a short prayer, and then I just dived in.
It's incredibly powerful. And when you came out, were there thoughts flooding? Was it just survival? Was it I made it? Was it wow? Or was it nothing?
All you want is you just want to get into a hot shower. So it was straight back to the expedition ship. There is that absolute craving. You just need to be hot. And I couldn't believe that my hands, which had been so badly damaged in a test room 3 days beforehand, were still okay. And we raced from the water onto the ship straight into a hot shower, and I remember that feeling as I turned on that hot shower, and Tim Noakes just put it on full blast and at
boiling hot, was
at
it?
maximum temperature.
Really?
This was the thing.
Isn't
about
that a shock to your system, though?
This is the thing, you know. Tim is he's a courageous man, and he challenges beliefs. Now, my father had been a surgeon in the Second World War and a Royal Naval surgeon, and all the experience which they had, they were saying, when you get, so often the German U-boats took out, you know, Royal Naval ships or took out Merchant Navy ships. The guys were in the water, and they always said, when you heat somebody up, heat them slowly so it's not going to be a shock to the body. Tim Noakes, through a series of experiments, realized that this was utter nonsense. And he put me into that hot shower, he put the boiling hot water on. Well, I tell you something.
So it wasn't burning your skin? Because I thought about it.
We could speak for another hour about how pleasant that shower was. It was the most incredibly wonderful shower I've ever had. I was in that shower for 50 minutes. 50 minutes. And it was just
bliss, the best ever. Ecstasy.
We reached a bliss point after about 2 seconds. It was wonderful. Yeah. And then we got out, and then we went down to the dining room, the whole team, and we sat there and we ate a meal.
What did you eat? That had to taste good.
It was fish, but I just remember just how very, very relieved we all were, and how happy we were. You know, when you do these swims, they're dangerous, and we'd done it, and it was a world media. I mean, it was a world media event. You know, we had people, Larry King phoning the boat, looking for the first interview. You know, it was CNN and BBC, and it's live, the North Pole, and there I am standing on the upper deck of the ship with a satellite phone, you know, in my hands, and we were just relieved and happy. Things could have gone a different way. On the day, though, we did the basics right.
And here you sit. Have you done any damage to your body? I mean,
No.
if you did that to your hands, have your hands recovered completely?
Yes,
Everything's working.
everything's in good working order, thank you.
And the next challenge, I'm sure everybody asks you that question, but how do you beat swimming, you know, Everest and the North Pole? Bake a cake.
The next expedition is just on another scale altogether.
What is it?
And well, we're keeping quiet about it at the moment.
No. Come on, Lewis.
But what I would say is that, I mean, it's for a 3-year expedition. So, you know, 3 years is a long time to go into the world's oceans. We're going to the most remote parts of the oceans, campaigning for national parks, and we're going around the whole world to the big hot spots around the world to campaign for these things. But I'm so excited about it. I just...
To be gone for 3 years?
Yes.
It's a long time.
It's every expedition now, Niki, should be 3 years.
Really?
No, I'm very excited about it, and my whole family is as well. We're all, you know. I think there comes a moment in your life where you say, I'm either going to do something now, or I'm not, and I'm going to let it slip. And I don't want to live life with regret. I've seen the oceans change, and I want to stand up now, and to do something as physically robust as this. You know, I won't be able to do it in a few years' time, so I need to do it now.
So projecting into the future is very important. Having a goal, having a dream.
Yes.
So people need goals and dreams.
Yes.
But you need to be very much in the moment.
Yeah, you need to be switched on. Yeah.
So, I mean, you're taking it, you're thinking ahead, the 3 years expedition.
Yes.
But you're taking one moment at a time, because one challenge at a time.
Yes.
How do you marry the two, though? I'm just, for people listening, how does one marry the two?
It's interesting because I was at the World Economic Forum the other day, and there was a businessman from the DRC, and he'd been hugely successful. And somebody was having a chat with him, and I was over listening, and he asked this businessman, he said, what was success? And he said, when you go out in life, make sure, okay, that just take one step at a time. You don't have to see to the top of the staircase. So you know what your dream is. But some people,
climbing the staircase.
Yeah.
But it's one step at a time.
Yeah, you're climbing a staircase, but it's one step at a time. So some people, they need to see all the stairs in order to start the climb up the staircase. And he's saying, no, don't do that. You know you're going up the ladder. just take each step at a time and just keep moving forward and keep climbing. And don't try to join all the dots.
Lewis, what do you want people to get out of your new book, 21 Yaks and a Speedo?
I would love people to come away with this. I'd especially love kids who read this book. I mean, this book is for businessmen and women, it's for sportsmen, it's for athletes, but I especially want kids to read it. You know, it's coming up to Youth Day now, and I'm always asked, you know, what is the most important one of those chapters? And I'd say it's the following. It's so important that you do in life what you love, what you're passionate about, and at the same time, do what you're really good at doing. And where those two things intersect, that is your destiny. For all too often, people are not doing what they really love doing, and they're not doing what they're really good at doing. And the consequence of that is you're going to get to the end of your life and you're going to realize, gosh, I was following somebody else's dreams. And worse still, I had all this talent. Because everybody's got talent and everyone's got gifts, but I didn't use them.
Lewis, thank you so much for joining us today and for taking time out. I know you're very busy, so it was lovely having you in the studio and conversing with you, and wishing you all the very best with your 3-year expedition. And just to say, you know, the book, I presume, is available at all major book retailers.
Yes.
21 Yaks and a Speedo. And they're fantastic quotes inside, wonderful, wonderful stories, and it's the kind of book that you're going to pick up, you're going to read, you're going to put the story down, and you're going to think about it long and hard until you read the next one. It was fantastic. Loved having you in the studio.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lewis.